This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines in today's edition of WYO Today Newsroom. Today, I am joined in the studio by Joseph Lowe IV. He is a dear friend and colleague and adoptive son, it sounds like, of the late Gerry Spence, one of the most famed attorneys in Wyoming and United States history. Welcome to the show, Joseph.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much for this.
So I know you've got kind of an interesting story about how you met Gerry, who you ended up becoming very close with over the years. What can you tell us a little bit about how you guys came together?
Sure. Well, Gerry Spence started a trial school, if you will, a program targeted specifically for people, lawyers, men and women, who want to do jury trials. And he did this because he found that the way jury trials was being taught in law school was atrocious. In fact, most of the time it's not taught at all. Some programs have a little bit of after class or in the evening kind of competition teams, and most have no instruction in this area at all. And so after he developed what he thought was a pretty good system on how to tell the truth, which, believe it or not, is difficult for some people, how to tell the truth, all of it, tell the whole story, the raw truth in people, which includes their emotions and the psychology and so forth. He wanted to make sure he shared that with the lawyers who represent people, ordinary people. He didn't want government prosecutors to get it, and he didn't want corporate lawyers to get it because they oftentimes are in the process of trying to deny justice from the ordinary person. And so once he developed this system and then used it extensively with great success, because he was inducted into the Trial Lawyers Hall of Fame as the greatest trial lawyer ever in the United States, he felt it was absolutely necessary for him to share this information, these truths, with those lawyers who most needed it. And so that was now in January of 98. It's the first time he's taking that program off his ranch in Wyoming, Du Bois, Wyoming, just outside of Jackson. And he's taking it to a city, in this case San Diego, for the first time so that he can get the word out and the message out. At that time, I was a brand new lawyer. I just received my bar results from having taken the exam in July of 97. So in November 97, I got my results and find out I passed. I was able to talk the law firm that I was working for at the time to send me to this conference, which is highly unusual because you don't get to go to fancy lawyer conferences anyway till you've been a grinder and associate for a number of years. And to do so after only a couple months is quite unheard of. But I was able to get in and told him it was a good opportunity for the firm for me to go, and so he sent me. I was a biotech patent lawyer at the time. Although I tried a few cases for the public defender in a program that they had that I could do as a law school student, I was not a seasoned trial lawyer at all. I'm not even a newbie. I'm still waiting to be birthed, if we can use that metaphor. So I'm at this conference, and it's a 3-day conference, Thursday evening through Sunday afternoon. And it's the last day. We're doing an exercise. We're cross-examining a cop on, a scene where he documented some evidence. Pretty routine boilerplate stuff. And each person went, each student went. All the students there are playing a role, where they're either playing the role of a juror, or they're playing the role of the witness, or in my case, as the lawyer doing the cross. And so just as we're getting ready to go, and I'm going to do it, and so it's going to be the last one we do of the day, and the program's over, lo and behold, the old man and his entourage doesn't walk in. And he's a very intimidating man based on his reputation, his expertise, and his, charisma. But when you're a baby lawyer, it's even worse than that. And so I'm like, here we go. Well, whatever. I'm just going to do what I do, and, I can't do anything else. I don't care. After about 5 to 7 minutes, the witness playing a cop starts to melt down and just sob. I mean, crying so hard they can't talk. And I'm like, oh, no, I really screwed something up. I'm in trouble. Start looking for an exit sign literally to run to. I look over at the jury, and they're all crying. Everyone's crying, even the director who is, that started the process. But I'm a little crazy, unorthodox, and I just did this thing. And then I go over and I sit down on the bench, and I swear to you, I'm looking, where's the exit? Because I'm done. My career's over. And then the old man says, God, like, yep, there we go. It's over for me. Tell me we recorded that. I'm like, just whatever. And he goes, that was incredible. I've never seen anything like that. Jesus. He talked like that when he was emphatic, or, it was important. And afterwards, he pulled me aside and wanted to talk to me and had some nice things to say, which I won't bore you with, and said I should come to his college. And I said, well, I cannot do that. And he goes, what do you mean, why not? I mean, there was a huge competition to get in to his college. It only takes 55 people once a year at that point. And there was about 300 or more applications every year for those 55 positions. And back then, they went to the top trial lawyers in the country. Everybody wanted in. And I said, I'm not qualified because, I don't have any experience. I just, just got my bar results. So I fill out the application, like you're supposed to. I get accepted, and lo and behold, I'm out at this ranch for a whole month in the summer of '98, and that's how I met him.
Oh, that's a great story. So, if you're just tuning in here, we're talking about the late Gerry Spence, one of the most well-known courtroom attorneys across the country. He never lost a criminal case and became well known for what's become kind of the name here of the game, the Gerry Spence method, which it sounds like, Joseph, you're very familiar with over the years, kind of starting in that world and then continuing on with such a close relationship with Gerry. He passed away in August at the age of 96, and just a bit ago, we celebrated his life at Thunderhead Ranch. That's out near Du Bois. A couple of fun facts. I mean, I think the life of Gerry, it didn't sort of build into this. I think that he was exceptional from day one. So a couple of things here. He, of course, he went to the University of Wyoming and then the University of Wyoming College of Law. He graduated first in his class in 1952. And he moved to Riverton here, and he was the youngest prosecuting attorney for Fremont County in his mid-20s. And I think, when we interviewed shortly after his death, his son Kent, he kind of said that was an experience where Gerry realized, he didn't have a lot of interest in representing big corporations and governments and insurance companies, that he really wanted to fight for regular people and ensure that justice was available to them too. I'm wondering, Joseph, if you've got a little perspective. This might be a really tough question or maybe a real obvious one, but what do you think really made Gerry stand out, even in the earliest stages of his career? Were there some components to the recipe of Gerry Spence that we can learn from?
Yes, definitely. And that's actually an insightful question. Here's why. A lot of times you'll think what makes a really good courtroom lawyer is someone who likes to argue a lot. We bump into friends and family who do that, and sometimes you'll say, hey, that person ought to be a lawyer. Well, that was not Gerry's skill set. Gerry's skill set was something quite more unique and quite different. So first of all, he is an amazing artist. Why is that important, or why did that contribute to his success? Because he sees things that nobody else sees. For example, if I ask you to look at the tree outside of your window, you probably look at it, and if I ask you to describe it to me, you'll probably talk about the trunk and its colors and texture, and the leaves, if it has any, if so, the shape and those colors, and you'll describe the tree. Gerry is different that way. He'll start to describe or tell you about the spaces in between the leaves. He'll tell you about the negative space around the tree, and he'll talk to you about the root system. And this is a metaphor to describe to you about how much depth he would look into a case, a client, the client's story, and the witness's story that get on the stands that usually we think are against your case or against your client. And rather than just say cross-examine those witnesses on the things they wrote in their police report, those are the leaves, or the things that they did in the investigation, that's the trunk, or the systemic nature of, say, police officers themselves or insurance defense lawyers and adjusters, those are the roots. He would spend a lot of time telling the rest of the story that most of us never tune into or even aware of or pay attention to, and that is the other space that's also true. He would sometimes refer to those things as to the things not being said. And oftentimes what it sounds like is what is the witness's inner conscious or their inner story. So he would endeavor to reverse roles with the witness and learn who they are so that he could understand how they were feeling. Because he believed that once he understood how they were feeling, he was able now to tell the truth, the full truth about how their opinions, whichever they are, or their observations were influenced or were being contributed by how they feel about the situation. And that's a very important understanding to be able to do if you're going to tell someone's full story. And if the other side is doing things that are not accurate, or spin doctoring, or cover up, or avoidance, or redirecting, all the stereotypical defenses that someone will try and do when they don't want to be held accountable, you're able to better and more fully bring that story to life by understanding what's not being said and giving that a voice so it becomes heard and becomes part of the story, which then gives the listener, the jurors, the full perspective they need to be able to really deliver perfect justice. And the courtrooms are a place where that can happen, but because of the way procedure has evolved since the beginning of the system, most of the time by untrained lawyers, it does not happen. The system tends to value function, being on time, sounding lawyerly, being intellectual, checking elements, quoting case law, filing motions and briefs. All that stuff is satisfactory to the law so they can feel like they're participating in the process. But it's enormously dissatisfying or unsatisfying to the listener, the juror. They want to hear the story. And there's a lot of things built in the system to try and stop that from happening for all the obvious reasons.
Gerry, I think, was well known for being kind of a rugged cowboy, but a lot of the work that he invested himself in had to do with, teaching and sharing. So not only do we have the Trial Lawyers College, the Gerry Spence method, but he also was a prolific author and wrote quite a few books. Joseph, can you speak to this desire and this motivation that Gerry had to kind of share this philosophy with other people and to teach them these methods, these stories, this kind of philosophy behind his success?
Yes. So one of the things that he learned through being part of the system, power structure at first, and that was where he first went to work as a prosecutor working for the government. And then secondly, for the insurance companies, working as an insurance defense lawyer to try and keep injured people from receiving justice. What he learned was that that power is an enormous power. And then once he started delving into that, he discovered that those who crave those positions, those who want to be judges, those who want to, be a lawyer that represents, what they think is success, and that is corporations and ivory towers somewhere, or, working for the prosecutor's office so they can be judgmental and put bad people in prison. He found that those personality types are ones that usually craved power, wanting to have power over others. And he quickly figured out that those who seek or crave power are usually the ones least qualified to have it. And therein lies where the injustice begins to stem from, if there is going to be such a thing. It is people in the positions of power who probably should not be there, and the very nature of power in of itself, which means you heard the old cliche or saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely, or all the other, and just to go with that. So that's what drove him to a large degree to start feeling on those things, thinking on those things, and then because the way he would prepare his cases and prepare his craft and to master it is he would write. He would write out his voir dire or his jury selection, write it all out. He would write out his opening, closing, or direct, crosses, all of it. That's the way he learned to prepare. And well, that then just led its way into then him started writing the story about the case that he worked on. So you had the Silkwood case, and then you had, the Imelda Marcos case, and you had the Randy Weaver case, and you had the case about Cantrell, Ed Cantrell, the police officer, chief of police who was accused of murder for shooting his deputy between the eyes while he was in the back seat because the guy is in the process of an investigation against Ed Cantrell for corruption and some other misdoings. And so all of these became very storied and famous cases, which then he would write his story about the process of working those cases and what he discovered was opposing or fighting he and his client for justice and for the truth. And to a large degree, that all came out to be large corporations and corporate greed and, large federal entities and state entities, governments who think that they have more power than everybody else and the rest of us have to do whatever the government says without question.
Yeah.
He didn't care for that at all. And he wrote a book, that was on that point called From Freedom to Slavery, which is the first book of his that I read. And based on the way I was raised and where I came from, which is overeducated people, but we're all military vets. I'm a former Marine, and every Joseph in my family was a former military person. But for some reason, we had an inherent distrust for government based on the things we'd seen in war and the way that the personnel get treated. And we sure as heck weren't corporate lackeys by any way. We were all business owners in the form of. I'm the only one with a lawyer. Everyone in my family was a doctor, a physician, or a surgeon, whatnot. And so his book really spoke to me because those are some of the beliefs that I had held, but could never articulate them in the mastery and the way that he was able to. Gerry Spence had the gift of being able to write and speak in a way that you could see what he was saying. I don't mean see him talking, see his mouth moving. His words have a way of causing images to form in your mind while you're listening. And he was very good at it, and he wrote the same way.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in here, we are celebrating the life of famed attorney Gerry Spence. He died in August at the age of 96 after an incredible career. He was famous across Wyoming, across the U.S. He never lost a criminal case, and he went on to teach what's become known as the Gerry Spence method up at his ranch near DuBois, the Thunderhead Ranch, the Trial Lawyers College, that he kind of passed on some of these philosophies behind his success. He was a prolific author, and I know that he was, an incredible lover of Wyoming. And of course, he passed away in August in California. I know that as he got older in life, some of the elevation issues started to bother him here, but he always held on to a real strong love for the state of Wyoming and for the cowboy way. A couple quick facts here. The Thunderhead Ranch up near DuBois, which still operates, kind of passing on that legacy of the Gerry Spence method, was kind of a combination early on of Bear Creek Ranch and Double Diamond Ranch. Back in the 90s, it was sold to Wyoming Game and Fish and is now known as the Spence and Moriarty Wildlife Habitat Area. Just another way that Gerry Spence kind of gave back to us. Joseph, I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us a little bit about your insight into what Gerry found so wonderful and appealing about the way of life here in Wyoming.
Yes, he said at a talk he gave, a TEDx talk he gave, that he is a Wyoming boy or person through and through, and he said it's something about the soil in Wyoming, something about the land, and once you're there, you can feel it, the energy and the purity and the pristine nature of the wilderness. And he said it gets in your blood, got in his blood. And he said he was born in Wyoming, and he plans on being buried in Wyoming or spending his last days. And because of a few health issues that you've mentioned, he had to get some treatment in California, and as a result, he continued to stay there his last several years as a result of those complications. But I was able to bring him back to his ranch, the Thunderhead Ranch, last summer, 2024, which meant the world to him because he was back at the place where he, again, felt the most connection to. As you know, and you said he grew up in Riverton. He also had a ranch in Lander for a while, and then he bought the ranch in DuBois, and then he and his wife had a house in Jackson and set up a practice there as well. So that's where he's been his entire life, and that's where, again, he wants to stay. The other thing that he really loved about it was how real it was. Now, we hear that word a lot. What did it mean to him? What's real to him are things that are alive, things that struggle, things that grow, because he saw those as necessary and very important parts of his own life to be aware of and to develop. He felt that although he was born, if you don't push or seek to grow or to learn and grow, which means you have to be willing to struggle, like you would say the buttercup does in the spring when it pushes up through the gravel and the dirt and the soil and then grows and faces the environment. Maybe a cold comes again, maybe some rain, maybe a moose steps on or whatever, but it has to struggle in order then to open, be beautiful. And that is a lesson to us all, that if we're willing to commit, just like the buttercup does, and if we're willing to struggle, and because we see something better, because we have a dream, that we can achieve things that people think cannot be done if we're just willing to believe and we're willing to work hard. And that's what really defined who he was with the land also, is that Wyoming's got some really interesting people. They have a code, they're kind-hearted folks, but they work hard. And they do very tough work, work that a lot of people will not or do not want to do. It's some very hostile environmental conditions. You, being from Minnesota, you're used to some cold, but as you probably know, you get some real cold down here as well, some real wind to go with it. And being out in nature requires you to have respect for it, and requires you to understand where you're at and to have some deference for it. If you're not, the bear's going to eat you or the wind's going to get you. There's a number of things. And he just loved that because everything was alive and everything was involved in the cycle of life, and it was all real and pure. In other words, it lived in the moment. It understood how everything's connected, and they were all part of each other in one way or another, in some form or another. And that is what fed his soul. In fact, he even had his little cabin built on the Wind River, the East Fork, and the bedroom part, which is nothing more than a screened-in room, just large enough to put a bed in. I think you can get one nightstand in there. This man lived very simple. And he had that portion built out kind of over the creek, so that when he was in bed, all he could hear was nothing more than the sounds of the water rolling over the rocks and through the willows and the cottonwoods and so forth. He didn't even have a TV in his lodge. He didn't waste time watching television unless there was boxing on. And he would sit there where he had an incredible view of nature, living right in it, and he would work and would write and would create, in both writing poetry, novels, just regular manuals on how to do things, as well as photography. He became an incredibly renowned photographer and published a book on that as well, and then poetry and the like, and was such a good painter, naturally trained on his own without ever having had a single lesson, that he submitted a portfolio to one of the top art schools in the entire country, if not the world. And not only was accepted, but actually gave him a scholarship. He didn't need one, but gave him a scholarship to come there And he went there for a little while and then decided, it's not what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. So it was someone who had more than one gift. But most importantly, I would say the biggest gift he had was his work ethic. That man would outwork any 5 lawyers, and he did so with everything he did. And so whatever he may have lacked in talent, which many people don't think he had any lack, but my point is the way he looked at it is talent was something that was like a raw material. You may be given a piece of wood, you may be given a piece of steel. That's not the gift. The gift to him is, what do you make with it now that you have it? And he would make that into something else. And so he used his work ethic to make himself an incredible photographer, an incredible painter, an incredible author, an incredible lawyer, an incredible teacher, mentor, philosopher. And just the list goes on, and all because he'd work his guts out.
Well,
so that's what Wyoming meant to him.
Well, that is absolutely the Wyoming way. I think a lot of our listeners can identify with that. And yeah, we're talking about the life of Gerry Spence here. And, before we go, I wanted to ask you one more thing, Joseph. Now, it's very clear, I think, that Gerry began passing on this legacy, began teaching this philosophy, these his vision for, the way to fight for justice for the regular man. And he has, left us a lot to learn from. But I'm wondering if you can tell us what you think Gerry would most like to be remembered for.
I believe that Gerry would most want to be remembered for how much he cared. Let me say that one more time. How much he cared, because he believed, let me say it again. He believed that caring is contagious. He said that if you could just care even more than you do right now, find a way to care even more. You care more about the client. You care more about your cause. You care more about what you stand for. If you can find a way to care even more, it's going to affect those around you who will also then begin to care. And if you're willing to care, then you have the opportunity, you have the energy, you have the creativity now to find a way to bring justice to what it is you care about. And he would say that caring for your clients that nobody else cares for, caring about what happened that nobody else cares about, caring about the justice they get for the rest of their life that nobody is involved in, allows you to do things that nobody else can do or other people say cannot be done, because you will find a way if you care enough. You won't quit. You won't marginalize. You won't minimize. You won't rationalize why it can't be done yourself. If you're just willing to care, then you're willing to believe in something bigger than you and in somebody more important than you. You take on a lot of risk, though, you say, if you care a lot. The risk is that you'll fail. You'll have to face your fear of failure. You'll have to face the risk that you cared about this person, but the jury didn't care about him as much as you did. And as a result, you couldn't bring them what they deserved. But he said he had never lost a criminal case. He hadn't lost a civil case since like 1969, after he started focusing on that only. And he said the reason why is because he cared. He cared so much that he spent all the time and energy and hours preparing because of that caring, and that was why he was so successful in everything he did, because he cared. He didn't just do it. It meant everything to him. And people around you can feel when you care about something. Or another way to say it is, they can definitely feel it when they can tell you don't care about it. You're just adding words. And that was what was important to him, is that whatever he said was really a voice of how he felt and what he cared about. And everything he did was behavior to support and prove how he felt and what he cared about. And then oftentimes in life or around different places in the country, it's the exact opposite. People got a lot of words, but they don't have any action or follow through, and then you can tell they don't really care. So that was what I think you'd want to be remembered for the most.
Well, that is an incredible mark to leave on the world. We're talking today about the legacy of Gerry Spence, and what a powerful, impactful man. If you want to learn more about the life of famed attorney Gerry Spence, who died in August at the age of 96, we've got a story up on rivertonranger.com that you can check out. And if you want to go back and listen to this interview, you can find it on WYO Today's Facebook page. I want to thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us today. And maybe you can leave us a parting word about your special friend and adoptive father, Gerry Spence.
I would end with, if there's something that moves you, there's something about Wyoming or what you do or your family or somebody you know or a cause you believe in, that you are only limited by your creativity and your imagination and your commitment. If you were just willing to believe in your dream coming true, and now you're willing to then commit to that dream on a daily basis with action of some type to move it forward in the tiniest of steps sometimes, if you combine that inflappable belief and that extreme commitment that I learned in the Marine Corps, I guarantee that you will realize your dreams beyond the limits of your dream. You will realize a life that you didn't even think was possible and you couldn't even dream of at the time. All because of love, which is belief, and commitment, which is honoring that love and that dream. Those two together will make you the most powerful person in the room.
What a wonderful way to end the show. Thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us here on WYO Today Newsroom.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm grateful that you cared enough about this topic to listen to a person share a little bit. It means a lot. Appreciate you.
Thanks.